What is a disciple? Although followers of Jesus are most commonly called Christians today, the word Christian is actually only used 3 times in the whole Bible. Acts chapter 11, verse 26, Acts 26, verse 28, and 1 Peter 4, verse 16. In fact, one of the most common ways followers of Jesus are identified in the Bible is by the term disciple. As you study the scriptures, right, this really shouldn't surprise us. This was a common concept to people at that time. For example, we can read about how some considered themselves to be disciples of Moses, John chapter 9, verse 28, and disciples of John the Baptist, John 1, verse 35. So then, when Jesus began his teaching work, we often see people being referred to as his disciples. In fact, the scriptures say that the disciples of Jesus were the ones to be called Christians. Acts chapter 11 and verse 26, the first time we read about the word Christian in the Bible, talks about these people at Antioch, and it says the disciples were first called Christians at Antioch. So the disciples, the followers of Jesus, were called Christians. So since this is a concept that is often used in the scriptures, it's important that you properly understand it. Maybe we don't use the term disciple as often in our culture as they did. And so we really need to spend some time to consider what it really means to be a disciple. This is a concept that will dramatically impact how you practice your faith if you let it. So first, we notice, as we answer what is a disciple, that a disciple receives training from a teacher. It's a simple point, but one that should be made, that discipleship requires a teacher. That is, to be a disciple, there must be someone you are a disciple of. A follower must follow somebody. Right? Very basic principle. But yet look at what Jesus says in Luke chapter 6 and in verse 40. He says, a disciple is not above his teacher, but everyone who is fully trained will be like his teacher. So Jesus makes it very clear that a disciple is not above his teacher, which implies a disciple has a teacher. So you can't be a disciple without having someone who is the teacher. You can't be a follower without there being somebody that you follow. And a disciple should be fully trained to be like his or her teacher. So as we think about that and make some practical applications, a disciple is not just someone who just associates with another person. And a disciple is not someone who is merely fond of another person. It's not just a fan. A disciple is not someone who roots for another person's success as a bystander, just hoping that he or she does well while you just stand aside and let him or her do it. Rather, a disciple allows himself or herself to be trained by the teacher with the intent of actively following the teacher. Because a disciple will receive training to be like the teacher, well, that also means it's crucial for each person to select the right teacher. It's certainly possible for us to select the wrong teacher and be the disciple of the wrong person. For example, you think about if you were studying to be a financial advisor, perhaps. You would need to very carefully select who you would learn economics from, so you would be successful in your career and so you could give good advice to your clients. Well, spiritually speaking, we need to understand who Jesus is and understand that he is the only one who is truly qualified to be our master. We must, if we really understand who he is, it will lead us to determine that he is the master teacher. And he is the one that you and that I must follow above all others. There is no one else who is so qualified to lead us in the ways that we're looking for Jesus to lead us to. Ultimately, that he is the one who will lead us to eternal life in heaven with the Father. In John 14 and verse 6, Jesus told his apostles, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. We cannot get to Jesus, or we cannot get to the Father any other way. Other passages in Scriptures also demonstrate the same point. So Jesus is the only one who is so qualified to truly be in that position of being our master and our teacher. So a disciple receives training from a teacher, but then we notice that a disciple is a student of the teacher. As a disciple selects the right teacher to be trained by, it's not just selecting the teacher, but a key part of the training that will be received is through being a student, truly being a pupil or a learner of the master. So a disciple truly learns from the teacher. Concerning disciples of Jesus, they must put in the effort to learn from Jesus. Now, when Jesus was on this earth, we see that he spent much time teaching. This implies that people spent time learning from him. For example, when Jesus encountered some Jews who had believed in him, I want you to notice it wasn't enough just that they believed in him mentally, but convinced about who he was. He told them something else here. John 8, verses 31 and 32. Then Jesus said to the Jews who had believed him, if you continue in my word, you really are my disciples. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So, just believing what he said, it's not enough. It is that we must continue in his word to really be his disciples, and we must know the truth, as he goes on to say. Well, today, you learn from Jesus, and I learn from Jesus, not like they did by literally sitting at his feet, but we hear Jesus' words through the pages of the Bible. So through our Bible study and through listening to others explain the Bible in an accurate way, then we can learn Jesus' words. And therefore, as we make application of this point, you cannot really be Jesus' disciple if you do not take a sufficient amount of time to learn from Jesus. But then third, as we look at this question, what is a disciple? A disciple goes to another level, and a disciple is an imitator of the teacher. So another part of the disciple's training that goes beyond just learning involves putting the learning into practice so that the disciple will be like the teacher. So disciples must not just be looking to gain information from a knowledgeable teacher. This isn't just some kind of empty mental exercise. Rather, the one who wants to truly be a disciple is looking to become an imitator of the teacher. This is what Jesus was talking about when he said that everyone who is fully trained will be like his teacher. True disciples of Jesus will not just take Jesus' teaching and then become whoever they want to be and live however they want to live. So again, it's not an empty mental exercise. Instead, they will become like Jesus by trying to imitate how Jesus lived and his character in their own lives, living in obedience to his instructions. Later on in Luke chapter 6, in fact, he talks about, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do the things I say? He wants obedience from those who are claiming him to be their Lord or their master. For example, the Apostle Paul told Christians to imitate him as he imitated Christ. 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 1, for example, he says, imitate me as I also imitate Christ. You could also see Philippians 3 and verse 17. Therefore, you cannot really be Jesus' disciple if you are not actively trying to imitate Jesus in your life. So, a disciple of Jesus is one who has agreed to follow Jesus and be trained by him. Disciples are trained by Jesus through learning from Jesus and imitating him. Therefore, disciples of Jesus are not just people who believe who Jesus is and claim association with him. Rather, they are true followers of Jesus who are striving to obey him in everything.